Okay, now we're going to talk about the big tool. Are you familiar with time boxing? Kind of. Okay, so I don't know if you know this or not. By the way, this comes from this book, which is a phenomenal book. It's called The Happiness Equation. And I'll put this, of course, online. But The Happiness Equation, I love it. It's just this guy, and he just decided he wanted to get serious about trying to figure out what is the formula for happiness. Like, what does it take to be happy? What do I have to do? And how much of this apply? And so he created this. One of the things he found is that so many people complain about not having enough time. Well, I would be happy if I could do this, but I don't have time to do that, so I'm not happy. He said, you know, it's interesting because we have all of us have 168 hours in a week. So 24 hours a day times 7 turns out to be 168. Well, if you sleep for 8 hours a night, anybody sleep for 8 hours a night? Nope. We tend to not do that. If you did, even if you did sleep for 8 hours a night, that would be 56 hours. If you work for 8 hours a day, that would be 56 hours. If you go 56 plus 56 minus 168, what does that leave? 56. 1/3 of our life is entirely discretionary, and that's if you sleep for 8 hours. The problem is we tend to let the inertia of life take over that time. We tend to let that 56 hours, it's 1/3 of our life where I get to choose what I do. I get to choose whether I'm going to move forward in one of my critical contexts or whether I'm going to not. We all, and this is the great commonality, this is like the thing that no one, we can all say, well, they succeeded because they had more money or access to more talent or access, whatever it is, we all have, like this is the most level playing field there ever is. We all have the same amount of time. It's what we choose to do with those 56 hours, the 1/3 of our life, that really matters. And so here's how time boxing works. You identify what I call your critical context. They call it, there's different people call it different things. But these are like the big buckets of things that where work has to be done, where stuff has to be done. So you identify, number one, your critical context. Then number two, you create a list. So has anybody read Getting Things Done? The book Getting Things Done? Familiar with that? So Getting Things Done is a bestseller book. I'll put that in there. There's a huge movement called GTD, which is just getting things done. One of his primary principles of getting things done is get it out of your head and put it on a list. Because as long as it's in your head, like you have this cognitive overhead. You have this, like some of your resources, your cognitive resources are just spent trying to remember all the stuff there is to do. But as soon as you get it out of your head and you put it down somewhere, then you free up all of those cognitive resources to actually focus on getting work done. So what you do is you create a list for each of your critical contexts. Then you do an allocation. So in other words, you say, okay, I believe that I already have a work time box, it's 8 hours, and I already have a sleep time box, which is 8 hours. But now I have this other set of hours. What am I going to do in these hours? Well, you know, one of your identity things is I am a father, and I am a husband, and here are my critical contexts. And it's like, okay, now based on each of these contexts, I say, okay, let's say I have 4 critical contexts. And one of those could be renewal, which is what we'll talk about when we get to the renewal principle. It could be you have 4 critical contexts and then just a bucket called renewal, which is basically I want to stay sane. So you have a list for each of these that's called a backlog. And that's your list. And then you prioritize that backlog. So you have a prioritized list for each of your contexts. And then you go in and you say, okay, this context deserves, if this total time is, you know, what was 56 hours? Then I'm going to allocate, let's say it's 10 hour, 5 hours, to this, whatever you do your, that's not going to add up to 56, but you get it. What is it, Lazy? Let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20. So that's not even close. Anyway, you do your allocation, and then you take your schedule. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You take your schedule and you schedule time boxes. Your allocation is based on, like, the beautiful thing about this allocation is it allows you to say, that feels right because I'm investing, I'm investing 5 hours a day in renewal. Anything more than that feels indulgent. Now I know I have a 5 hour a day allocation. I have a limit. I have an ability, a framework, a guide where when it's a yes or no decision, I can say yes or no. Because if I say yes, when my time allocation is used up for that, then I know that I'm sacrificing something else. So then what you do is you go into your schedule after you've done your time allocation. You go into your schedule and you say, okay, so this is Monday. I know that, this is my work slot. And by the way, you do this for your work activity as well. So you have categories at work. So you have like an email time. You have, this is when I'm going to build relationships. This is when I'm going to get work done. This is when I'm going to whatever it is. And you actually can do this on a microcosm layer where you say, these are the time slots that I have and how much time I'm going to allocate to each of them. So you start to fill in your days. And then when you get to a time box in that day, you go to the backlog, the prioritized backlog, and you just start checking off the backlog of that day.